What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. And we are here with another episode of our Turn Zero Tactics. Today, we're going to be talking about Layout 4 and how you can play on it and how to really maximize your deployment to give yourself a fighting chance to win every game. Phil, how you doing today, buddy?
Great, man. I'm ready to talk about Layout 4. It's a layout that's used pretty often, and it sees three of the deployment types that we see most often as well. So I think there's a lot of really good information in here that you as a player need to be super attentive of. Otherwise, you're going to start the game off on the back foot, and no one wants to be on the back foot right when the game begins. We want to at least give ourselves a fighting chance. Yeah, super important.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, which of the deployment zones are we going to be starting off with for Layout 4 today?
Yep, so we're going to start off with Tipping Point. Once again, super common deployment type. It's the short edge on Layout 4. This is one that you're going to see very, very often.
Yes, it is very common. It is one of my favorites to use as a TO when I am throwing things together. It's just kind of a nice change of pace. The way that the two middle ruins kind of sit at that angle pose an interesting problem because you can't fully hide in them with many things. So it's kind of like this open board, but the staging around the edges, especially from your own natural, is so good. So I think it's very dynamic in that way, especially when you compare it to like Layout 1. When you're trying to play on Layout 1 versus this, it's quite a bit different. And unlike Layout 2, it's not just a shooting gallery when it comes to, what all can you threaten.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some really good locations here, objectives that we can sit on relatively safely, even our natural. And we do have ways to threaten our opponent's objective, as in their natural, which feels very balanced in the sense that we do have an opportunity to play the game in multiple different ways, whether it be with a shooting army, a combat army, or maybe a hybrid of both. This board has the capabilities to do all of those things, which is why it's so popular.
Yeah, it's a very good layout. I think it is probably one of the most balanced in terms of how easy it is to just kind of play safely and play a very measured trading game, I think, without overexposing a lot or really feeling like you have to risk a lot of resources super early in the game. And I do really like that. What would be, kind of as you're looking at this, where are some of the key points where you're like, all right, this is obviously just an amazing spot. This is where my next, big asset's going. Take us through that process.
Yeah, so for me, right off the bat, I'm thinking that if I have an infiltrate unit that has relatively good combat, I'm trying to go in this pocket right here, right behind this middle L, because this distance to get onto my opponent's natural, if that's something that I think my army needs to be able to do, that is my first thing and probably my first infiltrator, because if I was on the other side, I'm probably doing the same thing. If I don't want my opponent to be able to threaten my natural, I'm probably putting infiltrators on the other side of this wall, an inch off it. That way my opponent can't put anything in there and reasonably threaten my objective. So both sides of it, that piece of terrain, this one right here, super key for me in terms of playing the game. Second place I'm looking at in terms of safety is right here. Pretty much this whole area right here is so incredibly safe. Even if our opponent starts here all the way on the edge, they have to get very, very aggressive to try to cut a line into anything that we put back there. So, and then all of this other space is pretty much blocked, right? We have this nice big piece of terrain here that blocks, this big piece of terrain here that blocks, small 2-inch ruins that block as well. So that whole left side of the board on our natural allows me to build up onto that natural quite a bit. And I like that a lot because it means that my natural is very, very safe, especially with the position of that objective. It's fully behind a piece of terrain. I can sit a lot of units back there, a lot of OC, and be really, really safe with the orientation of that wall as well.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Whenever I am okay, I got Layout 4, and we're playing Tipping Point, I'm all right, there's at least 2 Dorns that are just sitting behind my layers of chaff that are all just ready to run up to my natural and then just go move block my opponent from ever contesting me, right? I am just okay, cool. Well, I'm just going to cram a bunch of assets here that are so insanely safe that I can really dictate when I come out to use them, and you can just stage so far up the board. That natural ruin is so freaking safe on this layout in particular. You can really get fairly far up the board, and even if it's like an asset piece that you want to go maybe brawl in the middle later, you can stage it on your natural because it just is so far up there compared to some of the other layouts that you see. It's a great spot. And then usually it it can be a little weird. Thankfully, Adorn can kind of fit on the edge of that home objective, that home terrain piece, as well as just kind of be like on that little bit of an angle and be fully behind that bottom mid ruin. Out there. So it is completely hidden. Yep, down there. And then sometimes it depends on my opponent's range. Sometimes I'll put like an exterminator or something behind the actual, 5x10 middle ruin out there if I really am feeling aggressive. Otherwise, I'm fine to just sit something behind that really far back 4x6 way in the back and just move it up there as the game progresses. Like you can get so many infantry pieces up into good staging points on this map super super easily, as long as they aren't taking up the space of some of your other assets.
Absolutely. No, that's very true. Some things just to be attentive to, right? Like if you are in this piece of terrain wholly within, this 2-inch wall here doesn't actually protect you. It's true line of sight at that point because that is all one piece of terrain. So just be aware if you sit in there, you can be seen. That 2-inch wall doesn't protect you outside of true line of sight. So if you can't actually be seen, then you're okay. But that's the majority of terrain for 2-inch walls is pretty tough there. And that L orientation means you are moderately exposed to attack that middle objective, right? So if we're on there, there are shooting lanes to actually get across and get into that piece of terrain that can relatively threaten it. So for me personally, in any of the combat armies that I'm running, whether it be Space Marines or Custodes or Gene Stealers or Death Guard or whatever the case is, like I would strongly suggest, unless you absolutely needed to, stay off that piece of terrain, stay behind it, stay behind the profile so you can't be seen, and threaten the objective that way. But that means you need a relatively fast unit. So for Blood Angels, it's JPI or Saint Guard. For Custodes, maybe it's a Brick of Wardens with advancement charge. For Death Guard, maybe it's a full Rhino with a 10-man. For Orcs, maybe it's a wagon with a full squad 20-man of boys, right? Like all of those things you need to be aware of, because if you put a unit that only has a 6-inch move and a charge, and your goal is to try to get out onto that objective, well, that means you're gonna have to expose yourself on that piece of terrain, and you're gonna get shot up by an army that can do so and punish you before you even have the opportunity to trade units for points or units for other units.
Yeah, it definitely is quite a pickle as if you are going against an army that has enough shooting to just pop anything that you put in that mid board. If you are going to, the biggest piece of advice is make sure that is the only angle they can see you from. If you are going to be there, make sure that you are on that middle terrain piece where they are going to have to at least step on or at least toe over their natural terrain piece to see you, so you can at least see what shot you. Don't let them get any shots from kind of like that line of sight that goes from home objective to home objective. Like if you're there, like you're just way too exposed. You have to make sure you are tucked far enough around that corner that they can't even hop onto their own terrain piece across the board, be wholly on and see into yours. Make sure you are tucking and make sure you have something that can reach back out and shoot or touch them if they go on to their that piece that is by their natural.
Yeah, absolutely fair. We got to trade properly if you want to be effective in this game. Trading looks different for all different kinds of armies. Cody said it when we had him on, but I would strongly recommend don't get too enveloped in your opponent's points cost and your points costs. That is not how we evaluate trades. I'll just tell you right now, like at top tables, playing in competitive games, stuff like that, that is not what is valuable. It's removal of assets that your opponent has, increasing your points and denying your opponent's points. So I would there's very few units that I wouldn't sacrifice if it meant like zeroing someone's primary or denying secondaries or like tying units up for the end of the game, whatever the case is. Like I'm always going to do those things, and my evaluation of the unit and how it effectively does that isn't necessarily tied to its points cost. So just keep that in mind. Some other really good points of note here. So if we talk about infiltrating units, I definitely don't mind infiltrating a unit directly behind this wall. Like, I'm okay with this if it's a relatively mobile unit and I can use it to threaten my opponent's natural. I also, if you have first turn, you could infiltrate a unit right behind this wall. I wouldn't get on this objective if I didn't have to, but putting a unit right behind that wall, creating that 9-inch bubble here where nothing else can come in, and potentially denying your opponent early, really like that, especially with some armies that have a lot of infiltrate. Are there any other staging locations, Lane, that you like on this board?
No, I think that is a great one. If you're a marine player, that is the like ultimate spot in my opinion, just because you have the infiltrate and the scout. If you find out you're going first, your ability to just literally jail people from even reaching their own natural, can sometimes be super worth it, especially if you're playing a super fast melee army and you're going, all right, cool. Well, here's just 5 scouts strung out in a line that now you can't even really get to your natural on turn one. If even bottom of turn, you're just not going to be there, and that can be super helpful to just be able to really push and jail your opponent for a turn with a unit like that. So definitely like that. And even on the reverse side, if you infiltrate onto your natural objective with your own unit, and it has that kind of scout potential, and they don't do what Phil was talking about of putting your own infiltrators between that diagonal ruin, you can go ahead and scout forward with those scouts again and go jail them on that side if you really want to. Just buy the space, make sure you can take your natural. I think that's a strong position for both sides if you have the infiltrators, especially a unit like scouts that have infiltrate and scout. They're just super flexible.
Yeah, this layout definitely doesn't necessarily need scout and infiltrate because of how accessible your natural is and how accessible the midboard is. I would say it's not even mandatory on this layout. I'd be perfectly okay with not having those things, with just how easy it is to get to your own natural and how protected it is. Like, if something comes out here and is sitting on this side of the objective, I can threaten it with pretty much no threat to myself with shooting assets that are in this lane. I could have combat assets up against this wall, right? Like, we have ways to secure our objectives that some layouts, if you don't have infiltrate, you're gonna struggle with.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just this layout has some of the strongest. It has 2 very strong staging ruins. It is obviously the ones on your natural because you can just keep shoving up into there. It's so easy to get there from safety. And then also the other, the bottom one at that angle, it's so flexible. You can usually fit 2 units behind that wall fairly safely, and you can threaten your opponent's natural and you can threaten the middle. I think they are just so strong. That middle piece, just it is kind of a waste unless you're fully behind it and you have super fast units. But yeah, I think those 2 on each side they're just so good. You can really put a lot of pieces behind there safely and just remain like super flexible upon where the game takes you and where you need to go.
Yeah,
And I,
absolutely.
I do want to point out too, as you were saying earlier, I think I agree. You don't have to have infiltrates. The thing you might want though, especially infiltrate is nice, but lone ops, things that can go into the middle of this board still, just having 1 or 2 pieces that do force your opponent to come out and actually deal with a lone op in the middle of this board, especially super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Lone op is one of those tools that I have a very hard time of getting away from in any army that I run. I run a few. Like, I still pretty much always want to find some way to get some kind of lone op in there because it can allow you to play the game differently that a lot of people have trouble with, right? Because you're right, absolutely. You have to come out and deal with it. You have to get within 12, which means you're probably exposing yourself, or you have to get close enough for the combat unit that's can get in and combat and trade and charge. So yeah, super valuable.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I believe that tipping point is more of a castle style of deployment for this, or is it, do you have, I feel like no matter what the deployment is, you have the flexibility to try to flip the board either way. But I'm trying to decide if I think that it is stronger on tipping point or crucible. And I think we're gonna have to talk to Crucible. We're gonna have to wait until the end to make that decision because I feel like I can see it going either way based on a couple factors. Um, But I want to say Tipping Point, as of right now, I think is probably more prone to castling on your end of the board and not trying to flip it lengthwise. But, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as we get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next one. Everyone's favorite, Search and Destroy on layout 4. Definitely an interesting layout, definitely an interesting deployment, and for some people, it is just terrifying.
Yes, you can stage so much so close on this. It's not quite as wild as layout 2, I think, but it is still, you can hide so much. Like, if you want to talk about that little 5 by 10 ruin being useless on the other deployment zones, it hides so much behind it so safely on Search and Destroy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's almost no line here to get through to go after these units in the back. So super safe as long as you measure everything out with your opponent to see what you can actually put back there. But combat armies like Space Wolves, like World Eaters, like New Black Templars, I think, are going to really enjoy this because they can get up into your face oh so very quickly. And I said before, hey, infiltrate isn't as important in on Tipping Point. Well, I would not leave home if I knew Search and Destroy was out there without Infiltrate. I just can't. Because the difference between being able to put a unit here with Infiltrate off the objective to control my natural versus not having anything, having to start something on the edge, and then having it run over here because there's no safe place here. Even if I'm on this piece of terrain, well, it's true line of sight, which means if I can be seen, I can be shot. I would have to get all the way onto the other side of this piece of terrain to stand a chance of being safe. Oop.
Yeah.
To have stand a chance of being safe, or to get all the way back behind this terrain. There are not many units in the game that consistently have that kind of movement. So without Infiltrate, man, it can be real tough.
100%. Yeah, I think that is a prime spot where you're just playing right behind your natural. And then if you have two of them, or maybe your opponent has already decided they're going to try to deny you, if you are playing that denial game, it's right behind that large piece that's on your natural. You are just lining up kind of against the board edge, in a spot where your opponent can't just swing you super easily, and you're just waiting. You're right there. You can just go deny super easily, as long as you have reasonable OC on that infiltrating unit, and you're taking up a lot of space, and you're pretty well hidden. There's not a lot of things that are ever going to be able to draw a line of sight on you around that corner.
Yeah, absolutely. You tuck all the way up against that profile, and then you have other assets that are sitting right here, right? Like Lane's Dorns or Repulsor Executioners or whatever like shooting unit you have, you put them right here. So that way whatever comes down here to try to deal with those infiltrating units, which are hopefully relatively cheap, you come out here with those, and then in return, hopefully you pick them up, right? That would be the sequence I'm looking. I'm trying to bait you
Yeah.
with something to get you to trade an asset that I can up trade on you by maintaining pressure on this side of the board. And potentially denying your natural again, which is at the end of the day, some armies my end goal, right? I just want to deny you from scoring, especially turn 2. If I can deny you from getting onto your natural turn 2, if I'm going first, which I kind of have to do, we love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a lot of success with basically putting Rattlings right below that natural objective, fully tucked in against that terrain piece, having a unit of Catachans that are basically on the line at the bottom of that board edge, ready to just scout 6 and yeet themselves up the board, as well as a scout sentinel. And I'm just getting pieces and pieces that I'm cramming behind that terrain piece to just all get hidden and say, all right, I've got waves of denial ready to go and move blocks and all this other stuff. And I'm going to deny you as I just push probably about 2 to 3 tanks towards my own natural to guarantee that I can hold it. And it works great.
Absolutely. This is definitely a denial board, an infiltrator's dream, especially if your opponent doesn't have any. You can find yourself in a really tough predicament if that's the game plan, or if you don't have one going into it. Search and Destroy, for those that have never played it before, there's something you need to keep in mind just for your own essay. Good players in certain armies will try to jail you, and what we mean by jail is prevent you from leaving your deployment zone early on in the game. So Lane talked about it previously when he was talking about his scouts. And we're like, okay, you got a 6-inch scout move, and then if you go first, great. That means you can jail your opponent, so prevent them from moving outside the deployment zone. It gets worse on search and destroy, unfortunately. So, like, if I have infiltrate and you have none, I could, and I'm red and you're green, I could put infiltrators there. I could put infiltrators here. I could put things right up against the wall here and here, and then I could just say, okay, turn one, I went first. And I can get really aggressive. I could come down here with infiltrators and charge into maybe tanks or combat units or just move screen where I don't charge anything, but I prevent you from moving out onto your natural, which means turn one or turn two, you aren't scoring. That means that I can be really aggressive with these units. Maybe they have advance and charge. Maybe they have a large base movement, and I can get them up the board quickly and tie up units early on in the game and just prevent you from scoring. Search and destroy, you can be very, very susceptible to that as a player. Lane, do you have any thoughts in terms of how you prevent yourself from getting jailed or things you would do differently on this board specifically?
Besides having infiltrate, you have to
Yeah.
have that. I do think having at least moderate combat threats. Like if I'm on this deployment, I'm gonna personally use like a unit like Bulgrin to just string out. One's basically gonna be my front line behind that 5x10 ruin. I don't want it really out to be seen unless I'm against like World Eaters or something that has like literally no shooting, but it's going to kind of make a line across there. My other one is going to be in my other front ruin there below it, and they're going to be strung out there to kind of give me a front line of things where I have a wall that you cannot get past without, if you want to charge me, you can, but I'm going to be at least able to slap you. Um, and if you don't charge me, at least I can kind of just try to find some gaps in your jail and shoot everything else. If you're really trying to move block me, I have to be able to get angles on some of these things to deal with them quickly. It can be very tough if you're playing against like let's say Cody and he brings triple beast pack and he gets to go first. He 100% with their scout 9 and move 20. It feels like it's not that much, but it really is oppressive. He's going to be able to box me in very, very well. And by at least having a combat threat there, it's at least maybe going to, dissuade the charge and stuff and leave me free to be able to move and then charge on my own terms if I think that's the right call. But trying to prevent yourself from getting tied up with pile-ins and all this stuff where they just eat through your front line of trash, usually I have my guardsmen up front. If I'm playing in a matchup like that, is 100% my Bulgrin, hit my brick wall, that is fine. I cannot afford to lose my high OC pieces that are meant to go deny you points at some point. I can't have you just charge guardsmen and kill some. Yeah, that's one of the big things. If you see this and there's a lot of players in your meta who are likely to do something like that, maybe consider something that's a very good Overwatch threat. I'm personally not, like Krieg heavy flamers. Like I would actually take that unit if I thought I was going to be playing on this layout consistently. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I think they're a little pricey, but I would at least consider it on this layout because having a big Overwatch threat that can maybe pull an angle somewhere to try to stop you from getting boxed in on one of these sides is super important.
Absolutely, that's great advice. So, yeah, your deployment looks a little bit different in this matchup, especially against an army that you can tell is trying to do that thing. But you have to be able to determine that either as you're deploying or before the deployment even starts, in terms of what your opponent is trying to do. Some other things to think about: search and destroy, definitely. Think about putting a few extra units into deep strike or strategic reserve, and you probably would do units that you're not normally doing. For lane, maybe it's a Rogel Dorn goes into strat reserves. Maybe it's a Rhino or a Lancer or like maybe just a big Turvagon or Tyrannofax or whatever the case is. Like you're probably starting an additional unit in reserve that you normally wouldn't start, and I would just play around with that to see if you like it or not. But I know me personally, on search and destroy, depending on the army that I'm running, I am starting more in reserve than I normally would.
Yeah. And I will say that can be somewhat counterintuitive in some cases if you're playing against an army that is literally trying to jail you. If you are playing
Yeah.
against the new Thunderwolf Cav who is just going full like Stormlance, gonna run at you and try to put everything in your face turn one if they can. It might not seem like you're gonna take up space, but you're gonna need all those assets on the board. You would rather, because if you make that, you know, you go, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna, you know, I'd hate to get boxed in. Well, you're just gonna get boxed in longer if you have one of those pieces sitting off the board turn one because you're losing out on so much extra damage
Absolutely,
in
it's a
that
balancing
specific
game for
matchup.
sure.
Just
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Like we can't make those statements, and they're general for everyone. You have to be able to evaluate the position that you're in, and if you need those assets on the board. Other units that are great for search and destroy, anything with fights first, right? If I have a fights first unit to dissuade my opponent from going into me, maybe that fights first unit goes right here, and or off this terrain piece, and maybe they're all the way up against the wall. Right, they are not even an inch off
Yeah.
because they're like, "Come fight me! I want you to do it. Come on, I want you to do it. I want you to do it." And you're just sitting up against the wall because you have fights first. And if it's a good enough unit, and you know what's going to be coming into you, trying to jail you, well, that's okay. Because the goal would be you kill them before they get the opportunity to kill you in return.
Yep. 100%. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's all I've got for search and destroy.
All right, let's move on to the last one then.
All right. All right. Crucible of Battle. It's very similar. And yeah, I think I stand by my previous statement. I do think it is easier to flip the board if you really want to. I think if you want to push towards what would be considered your opponent's natural, you have a strong enough starting point that you can do it. But you definitely don't have to. And actually, that's one of the things I think I should preface is I think layout 4 is maybe one of the most flexible. It allows you to just keep hopping on either side of these ruins with shooting pieces and still be able to draw good lines of sight to multiple places. I think it's very flexible in that regard, and a lot of other layouts don't really feel that way. So I do think that is one of the nice things with playing on layout 4. But yeah, if you want to try to push your opponent's natural, obviously if they can't cram a bunch of things, you just have a lot easier time of pushing up and really threatening behind that, you know, natural L piece that we were talking about earlier. You definitely can. Other than that, you can still just basically shift this back to where it was for tipping point, and where that natural objective marker is now even more hidden from your opponent, because they have to come onto that terrain piece now. They can't just butt up against that wall. They have to come fully onto the terrain piece to deny you.
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes a huge difference just in terms of trading, right? That objective is even safer. It's in a much better position. We like it a lot more for defending our natural because the only part they can access from the other side of that wall is that portion right there, and more importantly, they can't access the objective from this side, which is huge just in terms of controlling it over and over again. So absolutely, Lane, you're 100% correct. I would say like flipping the board. So we don't need to get too much depth with this because this is very similar and the same, right? We still have great staging areas here. We still have great staging areas here. Our staging areas back here have not changed. They're still fantastic. We do want some infiltrate,
Yeah.
right? We do want some infiltrating units because it is a little bit further to our natural if we were to actually get on it. So I would really like to start an infiltrating unit, and I'm not starting it even on the piece of terrain. Unless it has lone op, and even then I don't like to because I don't want combat units that are even closer to me, right? If they're right here or right off this piece of terrain, I don't want to give them a reasonable access to my infiltrating unit before they have an opportunity to score me points. So all those things absolutely fair, but I would say I don't like flipping the board. Like I don't want to flip the board to long, like long deployment edges on this layout. I didn't like it on the other one. Honestly, I think you were right in your first essence where I can lock down my objective and be really, really safe with it as long as I list build properly. Because if I don't, like maybe I have to play differently. But if I have like a fights first unit that's just sitting on this objective with some good OC, there's nothing that's going to shift me off it. I could put great assets right here, shooting assets that are going to threaten this lane, and just say, okay, if you come out and trade, you're going to have to either shoot at me in terrain, which with benefits of cover, I like, or if you do come out and go into combat there, I fights first, and hopefully I'm able to do enough damage where they survive and returns. These layouts, especially fights first, some of these staging areas, especially our natural, we can really, really anchor the board on.
Yeah, I do think that is 100% fair. I guess, I don't know. Maybe it's just more reflexive, I guess. If I have the ability to flip the board, even as a guard player, I 100% agree. You definitely can just go take your normal natural and do that thing. But if your opponent isn't committing enough to holding their natural, my tanks move 13 inches. If I can blow up the few pieces you do have in that main staging area we were talking about, if I can secure that, if you want to bring assets all the way back to deal with that, that is going to be so hard for you to do. It's going to take a heavy initial push, but it can pay off. It's very army dependent. If you're super fast melee and you have that ability to go and flip the board and just then use that as a staging room, I do think it is viable. Again, you don't have to. It's just a line of play I think can really catch an opponent off guard if they've undercommitted to their own natural, and kind of keeping yourself open to that. I think actually is super strong and super viable because the staging between your diagonal ruin and their natural is just such a short distance. And if you can break their army and then flip the board, especially as a fast melee army, I think you're just set because you have really taken a part of the board that's really hard for them to take back at that point.
It is, right? Because to get down onto this objective, if we're just talking about like if they're doing what Lane and I are telling them to do, of either staging right behind this platform, or maybe they're in a great staging area here, to get back down onto this objective kind of means they're going to be exposed out here. They're going to have a hard time getting onto that objective as well as getting back into terrain and to not get shot by whatever assets which you should have either staged behind this wall or here, right? That way we can pop out and draw a line of sight onto the objective that we are potentially flipping over and over again. So there are options there, and you have to make an evaluation of, maybe I just put a bunch of OC on that objective and I flip it that way. Great, fine. Or maybe it's a combat unit that's super fast, like JPI, and they go in and wipe out whatever's on there. Great, that's good too. You just have to be aware of what's going to happen in return and be prepared for what that next wave looks like.
Yeah, got a little in the weeds on that one. I will admit that's a little more in depth on game theory. But yeah, I do think this is still very, very nice layout 4. You're so flexible. You can really just adjust as the game goes.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And honestly, layout 4 just in general is so good because it suits a lot of different armies and it has a lot of different play. It allows you to stay safe in your deployment zone, excluding knights because knights just don't care. They just come in, touch a piece of terrain, and can shoot through it. So we could talk about like the matchup in the knights till we're blue in the face, but that would be another video for another time. But if that's something that you're interested in, we could talk about Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights. Lane and I have a lot of practice into both.
Yeah. I still haven't gotten to play Lords of Dread yet, but I need to get a rep before they get neutered here soon, which I feel like has to be coming. But yeah, no, layout 4 is great. I think it's probably one of the most balanced in the game for sure.
Yep, and that's why you see it in every tournament pack and all that stuff is because TOs, yourself included, just know how valuable it can be to have a nice balanced layout.
Yeah. Yes, and we will hear every time how much people hate how short the wall is on the 5x10 ruin. We know. Stop using it. Stop standing in there. All right? Go stand in the other 2 amazing fucking ruins that are right there in the midboard. They're great. Use them. It's fine.
Yep. Absolutely.
But, yeah. We will definitely have to maybe talk about doing a Knights video though, as Phil was saying. Maybe put together a how to not get ran over by the towering units. Could be handy. I'm definitely down with that. Anything else, Phil? Before we peace out?
No, we got a lot of content coming up. We got a few big tournaments that both Lane and I will be going to. We got our next big teams tournament. We got the Denver 40K Fight Club GT. We're going down to Utah to play in Champions Cup. So a lot more 40K to come, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. The 40K season is definitely heavy upon us. I mean, it's pretty much just packed from here until the end of October with good big events. So looking super forward to all the things to come. But in the meantime, do not forget to like and subscribe, and please tell us how we're so wrong on all of this in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And do not forget that victory isn't given; it's forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We'll see y'all next time.